Well, hello again. Gonna do something a little different today. My name is Shane, and I like to do car stuff. Hello again. So, I needed something else to do. That's sarcasm. And today's video is not about working on my Porsche 928. It's about working on the other vehicle I just got. What did I get? It's a 1999 Mazda Miata. Picked up for a pretty good deal. It had a few issues, but also had a lot of new stuff. Like new tires and wheels, brand new top that was done well, Raceland coil suspension. I don't know much about Raceland. It's probably, I don't want to say anything because I don't know anything about them. Maybe they're fine. Anyway, fender needs to be painted or find a replacement fender, and the hood needs to be replaced because of a minor fender bender over there. But anyway, so pretty happy with the purchase overall. Got for a pretty good deal, and but it had some problems that became known to me as I was driving it home, of course. I drove the car for 30-minute drive, test drive, tested out pretty thoroughly before I bought it or agreed to buy it because I knew that it had a rebuilt title, so I wanted to make sure I went through it pretty thoroughly. However, everything was fine. Everything was great. And then I went and picked it up, and this is 4 days after I test drove it that I picked it up. And driving home, I had a couple problems. Well, I had about 3 problems that manifested themselves. So today's video is all about tackling those 3 problems and getting them taken care of. So what happened? Well, I had a fuel leak, which was on a fuel line going to the fuel pressure regulator from the main line. Looked like it had been repaired before in the past, so apparently it held up fine while I was driving it the test drive, but didn't make it past the drive home. Also had the front tires rubbing the inner fender wells badly anytime I hit a bump, like any kind of little small tiny bump, anything on the road. So I knew that already from the test drive. I was going to have to adjust that because they were just sitting way too low after they put the other suspension on. And then the battery light came on, and so once I got home, figured out that it was only putting out less than 12 volts sitting idle, so figured the alternator was pretty well done. Ordered a new alternator, so we'll be replacing the alternator, repairing the fuel line, and adjusting the Raceland Classic coilover suspension today. Let's go. So pretty happy with the purchase overall. Got for a pretty good deal, and but it had some problems that became known to me as I was driving it home, of course. I drove the car for 30-minute drive, test drive, tested out pretty thoroughly before I bought it or agreed to buy it because I knew that it had a rebuilt title, so I wanted to make sure I went through it pretty thoroughly. However, everything was fine. Everything was great. And then I went and picked it up, and this is 4 days after I test drove it that I picked it up. And driving home, I had a couple problems. Well, I had about 3 problems that manifested themselves. So today's video is all about tackling those 3 problems and getting them taken care of. So what happened? Well, I had a fuel leak, which was on a fuel line going to the fuel pressure regulator from the main line. Looked like it had been repaired before in the past, so apparently it held up fine while I was driving it the test drive, but didn't make it past the drive home. Also had the front tires rubbing the inner fender wells badly anytime I hit a bump, like any kind of little small tiny bump, anything on the road. So I knew that already from the test drive. I was going to have to adjust that because they were just sitting way too low after they put the other suspension on. And then the battery light came on, and so once I got home, figured out that it was only putting out less than 12 volts sitting idle, so figured the alternator was pretty well done. Ordered a new alternator, so we'll be replacing the alternator, repairing the fuel line, and adjusting the Raceland Classic coilover suspension today. Let's go. So this fuel line fitting here, obviously has seen better days. I think somebody, previous owner, tried to repair it. But anyway, we're gonna pull that off. It goes here, loops down, back up, right here. So this is just a loop basically. This is your main line, comes in, coils over to your pressure regulator, I believe. So anyway, now we're gonna pull those off with our handy dandy 5/16 fuel line removal tool. Hopefully it'll pop right off and not be a pain. And then we'll put a new line on there, which I'm having to make one with these types of fittings and some fuel injection hose. Make sure you get fuel injection hose, not the regular fuel line, because I can't find one anywhere local. So I'm gonna have to order that to get the actual factory molded part. All right, in case you've never used one of these before, some of them can be a pain, and there's different variations, but basically this end is open. You can spread it apart, so you just push it over that pipe down there, over the hard section of the pipe of the fuel line. Now, it's easier to do with two hands, but do it with one hand. It's a little bit tougher. There we go. So then from there, you just basically lift up. And when you lift up, it's got to go inside the bottom of this. Pushes the little springs out, and then it'll pop off. So I can't really show that, so I'm just gonna have to stop the video. Alright, so you can see it's off now. That's the blue piece down here. Oops. Pulls up. You can see this little ridge here. In case, I know a lot of you watching this probably know all this, but for those that don't, this pushes down over and locks onto this little ring here on the fuel line right there. This blue tool pulls up, separates this spring inside here, and allows you to pull this up. So now we got to do it to that one. It was here, and it was spraying this direction towards the shock strut mount rather. And anyway, so we got those off. Now I'm just gonna make one to repair this, put a little loop right here, and I'm just gonna do an easy loop. I'll figure something out. I've got 24 inches of fuel line. You can see this is about 8, the way that it bends. But it's also got 90s, and I don't have 90s. So, and this actually looks like, I don't know if this is stock. I don't think it is. So, anyway, maybe somebody can tell me if that's a stock piece or not. Well, maybe it is, because that one looks the same. So, I guess it is. But at any rate, that one is no good anymore. So, we're going to replace that. All right, so here are my replacements. The quick connect type pipes up there. Only problem is I could only find straights. I couldn't find 90s. So to compensate for that, until I can get an actual line, I'm going to, I cut this, it was 24 inches, but I cut it down to probably 12 inches now. What I'm going to do is I'm going to loop this around. Here, hang on one second, I'll show. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to kind of loop it like this. Put the two fittings on either end, push them down onto those. I'll zip tie up on the top of the loop to keep it kind of in that U shape. And should be good to go. All right, so this is basically how we're going to do it for now, for a temporary thing. I'll go ahead and put the connections on with the clamps. All right, so there's the final product of the temporary fix, and we'll go ahead and snap that in, and then snap that in. Now normally this goes inside here. I'm gonna leave that off for now, just since this is a pretty rigid deal. But now we're going to start it up and check for leaks. First, these two 14mm bolts right here need to come out. Those are holding this bracket on for the intake. And there's another one down below that we're going to get next. So after you take those two out, jack the car up. And then we'll see the underside. So right here is the other one. So we gotta take that one loose now, another 14mm, and I'll take that bracket out. So let's do that. All right, so got the bracket out. Now you can see the little filter. We're going to take plug loose first, and then we will take this nut off for the lead to the alternator. All right, back on top now. We're going to take the lead off the alternator. Right there. And that is a 12mm on mine. I think mine's stock. All right, so we got the cable off down there where my socket's pointing to, that nut or that stud. Now we're going to take the, we're going to release the tension on this one, loosen it here, and that'll let it slide up, get the belt off, and then we'll take the bottom alternator bolt out. It comes from the other side. These are 12mm on mine. I think mine again is stock, so yours may vary. Mine are 12mm. All right, so there's the bottom of the alternator. Here's the back of that bolt that goes through. That one does look, let me check. It looks like it is a 14. Yeah. Let's just check that. All right, so that one on mine is a 14. The upper ones were 12s. So anyway, a little bit different there. And I think what I'm gonna do on this one is grab a 14-inch wrench just to be able to get a little bit more space on it, maybe. I don't know, but anyway, that's the one you got to get out. And it looks like it's sure would have been a lot better if they could have put it out here. It's a lot easier to get leverage on it, but I guess it is what it is. All right, I just want to show this. I ended up using a 14mm ratchet wrench. And it was pretty easy to break free. This is actually just a flap. Whoops, this is just a flap. So you got a little bit more space than what I was thinking. Yeah, just take that out. And actually just point this finger tight right now. And then we'll pull that out. Pull the alternator out. Put the new one in. Hopefully get 14 volts DC when I crank the motor up. All right, here's my new one. Just bought it off Amazon. Nothing special. I think it was just over $100, 125 maybe. Anyway, time to put it on. All right, so installation is just reverse of the removal. Get it up in there. I found it easier to go up through the front here. Up through this way, with my hand. And then snake it down over the mount here. 14mm bolts, long bolt's gonna go in on the back, and we'll go from there. All right, plug your, I think it's from the ECM, but anyway, you plug that plug in, and we're gonna hook the 12mm nut back up on here on the main lead. Get that connected, and then we'll get it tensioned, tighten everything up. All right, so positive lead is connected, plugs in, tensioner assembly is on and tight, belt. May have to check the tension on that here after a minute, but we gotta tighten up the bolt on the bottom, and we'll be done. All right. Don't forget to put your, I think I called it a manifold bracket. This one right here. That was a 14mm bolt. Put that back in. We'll have to put the 2 bolts on the top back on. One thing I want to show you though, while you're under here, always a good idea to look at your belts. I saw that hanging down. I was like, whoa. All right, so looks like I got a date with the belt fairy here very soon. So back to the auto parts store. All right, everything's back together, tightened up. Just gotta hook the battery cable up, and we'll test start it and see how the belt sounds. All right, belt sounds good. Now assess the voltage. Okay, that's more like it. The other day when I got home and I was having the problem after I brought it home the first night, and I got the battery light on, I was only getting like 11.8 sitting here idling. So this is what I would expect out of a good alternator, 14.5 or better. I guess I've never seen one quite, I don't think I've ever seen above 14.5 really. So we're good. Okay, so maybe somebody can tell me what's going on with this. As you see, my antenna's up. A minute ago it was down. Now when I brought it home, it was up. And it wouldn't go down. With the car off, I tried clearing out the stereo, on, off, nothing. The only thing I've done differently, or the only thing that's really happened today, is I disconnected the battery and changed the alternator, hooked the battery back up. And when I went to start the car up, the antenna was down. I turned the stereo on, antenna came up like I'd expect. Turn stereo off. It is not going down unless it's key operated, which I don't think it would be. No, I wouldn't have thought so. So I'm going to disconnect the battery again and see if that's what let it go down. Maybe I've got something holding voltage on that up circuit. All right, I inherited some things. This 99 Miata that I just recently bought. Fixed the fuel leak today and replaced the alternator. It was toast. It came with new Raceland coilovers installed on all 4 corners, and the car sat too low as far as the, he also put, I think they're 16-inch wheels, 55, 16, yep. So I've got 16-inch wheels on there, and it rubs anytime you hit any kind of little bump. I mean, you gotta really baby it in order for it not to rub. So, I started off around 3.5, maybe 3.25 inches from the bottom of the threads up to the bottom of the spring. And so what I'm going to do is I'm trying to get it up to around 4. I did it around 3.75 just and put the wheel back on, dropped it and looked, and had a little more clearance, but I'd like to get a little bit more. So I'm going to try and get this up around 4 between this bottom and the top, and then I'll do the other side. It's a good thing I've been doing this because on this car I found that a few of the lug nuts have been loose, and on the other side one of them is dang near off. It's like it's so far out that you can see the threads behind it between the nut and the wheel. So guess it was good to want to go ahead and adjust these. Anyway, it's pretty easy. As long as you got your spanner wrenches that come with your kit. This is a Raceland kit. I'm not sure which one, but I will say that it's pretty simple to adjust. You back your locker off with the small spanner wrench, and then you just take your large one. I will say this, they tend to slip, so watch your hands. At least I am having problems with that. But you just turn it counterclockwise to compress the spring more and to move this bottom nut piece upwards. And that's really all there is to it. And then bring your locker back up, tighten it, and put your wheel back on and make sure your lug nuts are tight instead of the last joker that did it. Alright, so let me get a measurement. So it's not really rocket science for what I'm doing, but I'm sure there's more precise ways of doing it maybe, but I'm just basically using my tape measure. It's a magnetic one. Dropping it below this spot here, and then measuring up to here, this line between the nut and the spring, and I've got 4 inches right now, right between those two. So I'm going to put the wheel back, or I'm going to lock that down, and then tighten that up now with the spanner. But I'll lock this down, and then I'll put the wheel back on and drop it down, and after I get the other side done, I'll probably take it for a test drive and see if that helped. Hopefully the car's not sitting like some of the trucks around Tennessee now, with the front ends higher than the rear ends. All right, I think it looks pretty good. Definitely got some more clearance here, and it'll settle probably a little bit as I drive it around, but probably 1.5 inches there on the back side. Still probably closer to 2, but I think I'll drive it around once I get the other side done, see if that helps with the rubbing. Another weird thing, my antenna just went down by itself while I was working on the front wheel. I posted about this earlier, that my antenna was kind of stuck up, but then when I disconnected the battery earlier today, I noticed that it had gone down at some point during the time I was replacing the alternator. And I have done like literally nothing right now other than take that wheel off, adjust the coilover height, and put it back down. And while it was still up in the air, I heard the antenna moving and it went down. Weird.